And you have to set this code.
Hi, thanks very much for coming today. It's very nice we have very intimate house with friends, and today we are very honored to invite two very distinguished curators, which we admire a lot, to share with. They both had dedicated quite long period of time to engaging in a research project, both as a form as a paper delivery and also an exhibition, which we found is very much an echo to what our current exhibition is trying to talk about. And one of the argument or proposition that our show is trying to propose is how this vernacular religious art or folk culture as an alternative for narrations to the politics, the different forms of politics and economies or aesthetics. And today we are very honored to invite Taiwanese curator J.J. Gong and Malaysian curator, researcher Simon Soon to join us today. Our first speaker, so they both prepared pretty large, intensive presentation for us, so I will not give too much time for my introduction. Without further ado, to introduce our speaker. Professor Gong, he is currently teaches as a doctoral program in art creation and theory at the Tainan National University of the Arts in Taiwan. His recent exhibition, which is he will want to talk about it today, the title is Kau-Pué, Mutual Companionship in New Future, which is one of the international contemporary art festival in Tainan, Taiwan. So Kau-Pué is folklore, Taiwanese, which means companionship and the relationship. And it is to sort of serve as a social, self-organized and as a tracing back to the Qing dynasty. And Professor Gong spent almost 2 years doing other research in the Tainan region. And outcome of this research is a very intensive collaboration of contemporary artists and folk artists as a part of an exhibition and also a series of publication. And then following up Simon J.J. Gong's presentation, Simon Soon is a researcher and senior lecturer in the Visual Arts Department of Culture Center, University of Malaysia. And Simon has written very intensive topics related to the 20th century art across Asia and particularly curates exhibitions. And he is also our guest curator of the current show, which is The Mysterious Towards Reality, which is grouped out a very beautiful setup. So now I would like to welcome Professor Gong for his presentation. And each one will have like 30 to 20 minutes presentation, followed we will have Q&A.
Thank you, Freya. Thank you for your introduction and the invitation. And many thanks to the invitation of Parasite. And now I will talk about some issues that initiate from my curatorial work in Tainan City. As me and Simon, we have some talk in Tainan last month. So based on that, today maybe I would put more theoretical reflection on this issue. I will focus on the two concepts, the social or collective. That is based on my experiences that during 2 years I do the curatorial works. I organize a team of curators, and we work on the folk religion and worshiping, parading. And the name is Kau-Pué, as the Freya said. That is a come from Hokkien dialect. But today I will focus on just 3 points one is that how to use this concept to reformulation of Taiwan art history based on the network linking. Because Kau-Pué is kind of a relationship in some social conditioning and the network of the actor. So this kind of a linking and dialogue maybe we can appropriate from the folk art, the folk literature, and reuse it back as a reflect into the folk art themselves. So because the folk art come from the temple culture and they have their contemporary condition, but in Taiwan it was almost separate from the academy and separate from the canon of the art history narrative. This is the first point. The second point is that the method, how to use a different method. In Taiwan recently, about 10 years, we are talking about the methodology of ethnography, anthropology, to appropriate this kind of method into contemporary art. At the same time, if we put more focus on the history of photography, maybe we can find some new clue about the folk festival, because it has a long history from the Qing dynasty to the Japanese occupation and to the modern time, contemporary time. We have a lot of this kind of photography about it. So through the editing, publishing, and organizing the forum in Taipei Biennial last year, we try to think a new way of method to organize this kind of body and image. And the third point is that for the pure methodology of curatorial works, we adopt the method of interview, interviewing the artists, the traditional artists, the young artists, and people who do the work of the conservation, the repairing of the traditional temple painting and that kind of work. And after that, we the process of editing, we have built some kind of network and dialogue that I think is quite important for the method of curatorial work. I think it's the most interesting part for me. And after that, we organized the public forum, and based on the different publication, we have a 3 period of publication. This is the first period. The first year, we prepared for 2 years. The first year, we made about 20 interviews of different kind of artists and the historian and the people who works in the cultural bureau. And this money is come from the government. And for the second period, we used the resources of the university. The art critic in Taiwan, we organized an issue on the history of photography, on folk, and we invite some art writer to write the research paper, and at the same time we collect the document, the different image. So a lot of image in contemporary artists and the historical document of the folk festival, religion when they are parading or in some ritual, situation, scenario, and through this process we organize the different documents. This is the second process. But in the last period, when we participate the Taipei Biennial, we already run out of all money. Then I have to pay for it. Yeah. This is the third period. We published a more big size image for the conveniences for the participant who can join the discussion of all the detail. So I think this is yeah, please. So all these three kinds of publication were before the opening of the exhibition. So after that, we begin the exhibition in this year, January, in the middle of January. In this picture, you can see we say it is the Qing bowl. Every 3 years, like the triennial, some temple will build their own Qing bowl, and this bowl is come from the Hokkien province, floating. But this king, we say it's Oya. It will bring the plague. So this kind of disease floating from the mainland to the coast or the riverside of the country, and people will first receive it, and then they begin their ritual during 6 months or 8 months or whole years. First, they will build a boat through 6 months, and then in the final days, they will parade with the bowl. We say it's the Qing bowl along the town, along the and through the community, and arriving the riverbank, and then they will burn the bowl and send the king to the heaven. So it is the simple structure of the whole ritual. So this is the final scene, and people will gather and following all the parade of the pilgrim. So this scene is during the build of the boat, and there are some paper cut shape that who were the guard and the troop who protect all the ritual in the boat. And there are, I think there are 3 or 4 kings or Oya. They will gather every day. This is their office. So they will prepare the chair, the tea, and sometimes they have to wash their hands. So all the tours, they have to support the process of the ritual. So they have to meet every day and decide something, which direction the ritual should go. So I think there are 5. And sometimes during the different period of a ritual, the Oya, the king, he will say something through the shaman. So this ritual is they are going to say something in different days. So this kind of system were very prevalent in the south part of Taiwan. We call it Oya belief system. But today I would think about this kind of religion, the folk religion, in a different point of view. That is, I will use the concept of social and collective to think about their network. Yeah. It's Bruno Latour. In the book, he wrote an article on the concept of network. He said that when we use the word network, it's a string of action. Yeah. It's a network of the actor that each participant is treated as a full-blown mediator. So every temple who participates in kind of collective or the social, they will play some role, but as a mediator. Yeah. To put it very simply, a good actor network theory, this is the perspective that he adopts. Account is a narrative or a description or a proposition where all the actors do something and don't just sit there. So when we're talking about this kind of parading, the pilgrim of the Oya during the festival, I'm just thinking about this kind of the possible reflection on what kind of network they have and what kind of history they have passed. So this kind of action they call it a parade border. What is parade border? In Qing dynasty, in Tainan city, there are different temples they were organized by themselves together. It is not organized by the government, by the state. It's kind of a collective or the social. And until today, you can see Maju is another kind of a belief. It's like the South Sea goddess who protect the ship and the fishermen. Yeah. They will make this kind of a parade of border, and during this kind of parading and the pilgrim, the most important part is they will pass the different temple. They will stop on the different temple. So when they stop in the different temple, they will have to do something. What kind of thing? They have to anticipate what kind of relationship we have with this temple. So they have to connect before they arrive. Maybe 1 month ago or 2 months ago. So for their mutual relationship, they will both decide how to deal with this kind of communication exchange. If they agree with that, they will just very I think it's not in friend, not in head friend, on the Facebook. So it's a quite superficial relationship. Yeah. Not so. These parading troops, they will just stop for just a while and exchange a very simple material. Yeah. But when they have more deep relationship, when they communicate before the parade, the activity of parade arrive, they say we have a long history of communication. So this year I will donate the different program for you. Maybe some music, some performance, and then they will join all the parade process. Yeah. So that's why the parade of the border will become longer and longer too. because different union, different temple, they will decide to participate in different roles. And then when next year or next 2 years, the draw change. Maybe take for example, this year when the first temple it played the main role, but the second year or the third year maybe it change to the maybe this one in different region. So they will help them and return what they should give, what they should give back. Like some, I think it's a gift. It's a economy of the gift. So when you receive the gift from the different temple this year, and next year when they have activity or ritual, you have to return it. So it becomes a network, but the relationship between them may be changed every time. So it's like kind of update every 3 years or every 2 years. So this is one example of the parade border. It was go through all the town and community, and I have and this year in February I have to drive a car, and I take my artists and musician with me. We join the parade. When we make some mapping of their night of the parade, they went through all the town. There are 3 quarters of the night, and the red line is the first day. The second one is the second day, and this is the third day. So this is just a little town, but they are full of different temples. So on the line they pass, there are almost 30 different temples. So they have to stop one temple by another. So the whole day they can just go through one part, the 1/3 part of the town, and this is the second day, and this is the third day. And after the third day, the last ceremony will come. It's the burning the kimbo. So we can imagine that when they stop in the different temple, it is a kind of a negotiation on the social level. But I think it's not only on the social level. It includes the political factor, the economical factor, or even when the urban plan change, they will change their relationship with each other. So it's a kind of fluid society. So on this kind of fluid society, they change every 2 years or 3 years. They update all the time. But at the same time, they don't need any help of government or the modern state. So that's the point. There are some story hidden on this kind of parade border. So this is the first day. We can see some detail, and there are different temples installed on the road. So every 3 years they will have this kind of a ritual, and this is the ending. And this figure was made by the paper, and this is the kimbo, and this is all the paper who will help the burning. So the whole exhibition happens in the sugarcane factory, and the sugarcane factory just located on this side. So it belongs to the whole community. And the reason why we participate the parade, that is because we belong to, this sugarcane factory belongs to the whole town in the community. And when I think about the history of the sugarcane factory, it's built on 1906 by Japanese. And we find some picture very interesting. It is a picture photograph on the 3rd November 1895. It is the celebration for the Japanese occupation completed in Taiwan over the whole island. And it is the same day that is the birthday of the Japanese emperor. So you can see some Taiwanese, they wear the costume of the Qing dynasty, and this is the kind of figure who will appear in the parade, in the festival of the folk ceremony, and you can see here is a girl who stands on a very high structure and play the goddess. So every people, they are very curious about the camera. And the one only who are laughing was the mask, who are using the mask. And the most ironic is there are some little flag, you can see here. It's a Japanese flag put on the house corner. So when the Japanese occupied the whole island on 1895 November, they invite the people who join the celebration. So how the people can express themselves is the folk festival culture. Yeah. So behind this picture, we can see it's a bloody history, because the sugarcane on the side of the sugarcane factory, there is a big event of massacre. Yeah. Because when the Japanese troops went into the Tainan city, the last stop they encountered the very strong resistance is on the side of the sugarcane factory. There is a big community organized by the farmer. But that time the whole Qing dynasty military was broke down. They all escaped. So, but it's quite curious that the Japanese military on the side of the new sugarcane factory, actually they face with a very organized power of resistance. So who organized this kind of power? So that's my question about that. And this painting is the only painting that painted by Japanese painter, but you can see the different part of the battle. They seems like kind of a little bit tension, but in the whole series of this kind of a war painting, the only part who win all the battle will be the Japanese military. So this picture is only for the Tainan, for the Tainan scenario, for the Japanese military when they get into Tainan, before they get in, they encounter the very strong resistance power. Yeah. And when they pass this power, when they pass this battle, it's a very strong. There is a rumor that they even sacrifice a king, a prince of the Qing family. His head was chopped by some farmer. Yeah. So before this picture was taken, that there is a big massacre because Japanese military was quite furious about the farmer. They organized by themselves. So this is painful. I think this is the way the ordinary people who memorize I think it's a pure power from the folk society. But when we use the word society, I'm a little bit. I think it seems that there are a stable structure when we use the word society. But in 1913s to 1915s, there is another big event that in Tainan County, there is a people whose name is Yu Qingfang. He used the order in the name of the oil, in the name of the king. And he is kind of a shaman. He said that the king said he has to organize the people to fight with Japanese. So in the process of preparation, he organized about 10,000 of people, and it made a very strong battle until they have to hide in the mountain district in Tainan County. And this is the end of the battle in 1950. They were arrested by Japanese and sent into the jail. And in the beginning, the Japanese decided to kill about 800 people. But after the big debate, because it becomes an international affair, so they have the big debate about how they use the law to confront it with these people. And finally, they admit that maybe it's the problem of education. So they just sentenced about 8 people to death. So today I will talking about the different ideas that if there is a society against the state, this is my point. And the whole statement of the curatorial work, we are trying to dig in out that kind of thinking. But it is another, in the beginning, I already have this concept to do my curatorial work. It's an after thinking. So people think that in primitive society are society without the state. So it seems that they are lack of the state. They lack of the state to structure their economics and society, all kinds of conditions for normal society. But for the French sociologist Pierre class, he said that this is thinking in the perspective of the modern state. But he said that maybe we can think about this logic reversely. That when we say the primitive society, they become kind of society of lack of a normal economical structure, lack of the market, lack of the different conditions that a normal society needs. Maybe we just use the modern states as a model to think about this kind of society. So if we put the state, the concept of state in the bracket and use the Deleuze, his idea of war machine, because you know the Deleuze concept of war machines directly come from the class. So they are in Latour belongs also the fluid society, the fluid theory of society. So they are group, and in Deleuze thought that maybe we can use kind of a force and a power to think about that kind of a parade border. It is we put it more very simply. It is a war machine. It is this kind of war machine who can organize by themselves very fastly without any government and become the war machine to resist the Japanese military in Taiwan. Although finally they sacrificed all their life, there are about 2,000 people were killed under the massacre of the Japanese military, including the children and the women. But I think when today we are thinking about the contemporary artists or the art group faced with the governance, the governance of the state, the modern state of the capital market. My curatorial work trying to think about in the reverse direction. It does not go back to the primitive society. It is use their methodology to organize a fluid society, to organize the collective, to organize the social, and not the stable society. Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking about. I put it very simply. So now, so when we quote from the 1,000 Plateau, Deleuze said that maybe there are different kind of forms of a war machine. And ideological, scientific, or artistic movement can be a potential war machine. And I think when we appropriate this kind of thinking that I'm thinking about the curatorial work and the editing work may be a potential war machine. But sometimes we use the money of the government, and we use the resources of the university, the institution. But sometimes we have to pay by ourselves. Yeah. But when we do the works, they will never do. But it is step by step we establish the different technique that organize the people. I think the editing work is a kind of a technology that gathering people. It's a technology of assemblage because we can gather in the different people who are interested in the work of the editing work themselves. But in the other hand, we can use the process of interview to gather in some different artists or researcher or some people who works in the temple field. So my idea is quite important. So after the process, we interview different. This is the director of the Cultural Bureau of Taiwanese government, because we got money from him. So we have to interview him. And I write the content of the article for him, because he said he's a lack of time. So we just replace all the content of the interview and write as my life, but the name, but in his name. And this is our historian. He's thinking about the different urban imagination, because he was the Culture Bureau's director before. So he did many consultant work for us. And when we make the interview, we find many artists, they have this kind of background. They work for the temple, and they work for the puppet theater, and they can carve the hat of the puppet. It's quite traditional, but this artist, we say it is a contemporary artist. So it is a kind of process of discovery that we can combine them together. And we dig out their history, their stories. Not only the artist, this is a designer. He's also a calligrapher. And this is the conservator who will make the repair of the temple door. And in Taiwan, this is across all the discipline, but it's never done before that, because the art historian are difficult, but we use interview and publication as the way. And during the process of editing, we also, because we have a long time, the whole years for this work, so I visit the different festivals. This is a festival in Japan, and we reflect their concept of the exhibition and their methodology. And some traditional temple painter, but young generation was also become our interview, and we written down his process. It's a quite hybrid experiences, because his mentor is quite old generation. They use very direct the relationship between the master and the apprenticeship. But when he becomes 30 or 40 years old, different university, they have a different department for painting. So he also joined in registration into this kind of department. So he have a different layers of in the concept of the art, all different art. And one part is for the craft, the handicraft, and the other part is for the modern art, the modern painting or contemporary painting. So I think it's quite important for the elaboration of their experience. only 5 minutes. So I think, and for the ghosts, there are some artists, they deal with the problem of the ghosts, the anonymous who sacrifice in a different disaster or the massacre, and they dig out the history in the background. And this is the shaman. But this shaman is not belongs to the Hakka or Hokkien people. These Aboriginal people's shaman. It's quite young, but his story is very magnificent, and we have the artists who cooperate with the shaman to formulate all their experiences. So I think finally because I only have 3 minutes now, maybe we can see some moving image. This is what I'm doing. I think this is an important experience, but because all our budget of performance were cut by the city government, so finally we decide in a very short time we just joined the parade of the border. This is one part of it. And this performance is during the folk festival. It's a center pillar performance that the young children, they play a different historical role, and they have to pass through all the town. And this is our artist group. And they are photographers, painters, and musicians. Sorry for the internet. So I think for us it's just a beginning to join this kind of parade. And maybe it needs more long-term of participation and communication with the folk, social or collective, because they are so open for their context. So it is collective, and this collective is not limited in the academy, contemporary art, or the very narrow contemporary art circle in Taiwan. We try to break through the circle and join or connected with the folk collective, and they seem quite open for us. So, but we spend a lot of time to join their activity in the ordinary life. So some people I even interview or go to see their ordinary ceremony or kind of a ritual for 15 times or 20 times. But after that, some miracle happened because we can ban some very big the wall painting from the temple and into our exhibition. I think, but today I just share my idea. So I think I can stop here. Thank you. very much.
I know there are so many to talk about. Maybe we can open that to the discussion later. And also, it's a very good bait to invite people to go to Taiwan to see the show, because it will still be on view until June 25th. Yeah, so it's a good food, good show. Welcome everybody to Taiwan. That's the Chinese. Yes. Now we're calling with welcome Simon. So while we kind of need to change the so Simon's gonna share us with this long research he did about if Professor Gong is talking about Oya. Oya is the king, the goddess of the king, and Simon actually has a research about Fatimah, which is a goddess, and which is served as a house temple in Klang. Klang is similar to Thailand as a port city in Malaysia, which that offered, Simon argued, as a transhistorical and transcultural bond between two migrant communities, which is Javanese and the Chinese, in the 20th century.
Good evening, everyone. So, first of all, I would like to thank Parasite for organizing this talk and for giving me the opportunity to present what is essentially an ongoing sort of research. I imagine this to be a very slow and long drawn-out sort of process, but I want to use this opportunity to share some of the key ideas with you and hopefully get some feedback. So, it's not in paper, but actually how this research sort of came about was actually an opportunity to sort of acquire my own set of Kau-Pué magazine, probably about more than a year ago now, when I had the opportunity to be in a residency in Taiwan, and found this sort of such an exciting project, and it's spurred me to sort of think more about folk culture in sort of Malaysia. So I'm primarily an historian, but I also work on sort of visual culture across the 20th century. Yeah. So I came to this topic primarily to unsettle the common hagiographical sort of account of what I consider to be very elite sort of perspective of Southeast Asian Chinese history, right? This is exemplified by this great-born Chinese Song Hong Xiang's 100 Years History of the Chinese in Singapore, published in 1923. This narrative of mercantile ambition and its success. It's primarily a story about mercantile ambition and its success story. Often this justifies the social order rooted in capitalist and liberal values that perpetuates a rags to riches story. The Chinaman here is depicted is a loyal subject of the British Empire. The photograph is set within the backdrop of Roman colony. The props include a bowler hat resting on a crest with the acronym standing for Swiss Chinese British Association. But instead, with this research, I want to ask three questions, departing from a world that parallels Song Hong Xiang, but is predicated on a very different type of social, spiritual dynamic. So studies concerning, and these are the sort of three questions I want to ask. What can working class cultural values and spatial imagination teach us about race relation? How do migrant mythologies generate a form of transhistorical and transnatural cultural allegiance? And lastly, in what form is this manifested in a built environment? And what does it tell us about the history of a migrant sort of settlement, right? So, on with my research. Studies concerning the worship of Malay genius loci, the Datok Fatimah, amongst the Chinese communities of Malaysia, Singapore, and parts of Indonesia, are often characterized by its typological features. Often this is iconographic. The figure of the Datuk, or a grandfatherly sort of figure of some communal authority in the Malay language, who is at times accompanied by the nenek or the grandmother as his consort, is dressed in Malay customary garb. There are two forms he would normally assume. The first is as a person of noble prestige, signified by the tempolo or the pleated crown that you see up here. He wears and the kris that he wields. Secondly, he is also seen as a wizened old man, supported by a walking stick and sporting a songkok, which is the conical hat adapted from the Turkic fez sometime by the mid-19th century, but came to be associated with religious piety. These two familiar iconographies recall what British colonial administrator Hugh Clifford would typify as the Weltanschauung of the Malay ecumeny, namely the court, the royal court, and the kampong, which is the village. It would seem that viewed from the outside, these two states represent two primary spatial orders that structured the Malay world, that of belonging to the aristocratic and the folk. But spirits of the land are not always autochthonous, in other words, indigenous or native. And this is where it gets interesting. Within popular Chinese religion, the apotheosis, or the elevation of a person to a divine status of certain figures who have met untimely death is not uncommon. A well-known example from Singapore is the death of a German girl whose parents owned a coffee plantation on the island of Pulau Ubin in 1940. The story goes that as she was escaping detention following the outbreak of World War I, she fell off the cliff and died. Her subsequent sightings as an apparition led to her deification by the Chinese community on the island. But my main sort of like research concerns a house temple that is located in the village. It's on the left bank of the Klang River as you enter from the streets of Malacca here. Klang is a port town located about 30 kilometers from Kuala Lumpur. While the area was settled for a long period of time, Klang only came into economic and modern prominence due to the rapid expansion of tin mining in Kuala Lumpur from the mid-19th century onwards, because it was the chief outlet for Selangor's tin. A larger port was constructed in 1901 close by to accommodate the docking of more ships, and soon after that, the Buddhist court of Selangor moved its royal seat to Klang in 1903. In effect, Klang as a township is in some ways Kuala Lumpur's neglected twin, since their modern history cannot really be separated. For example, in historian King's research, he notes how Klang had by turns served as Kuala Lumpur's port, agricultural and industrial counterpart from the 19th century onwards. So this research is therefore concerned about the thinking of urban space in relation to concepts of homeliness and what occurs when this notion is unsettled by forces of social political change. The site I'm looking at here is located on the north bank of Klang. So the north bank, so somewhere here. This is the area. On the north bank of Klang River, and it's a small village known as Chai Chia in Hokkien. I can't really pronounce it properly. Its population originally came from the Jinmen Island in Jen province sometime in the late or the 20th century. So I tried to understand this primarily through the study of a house temple that accommodates the mediumship of Datok Fatimah, who is the principal deity of the house temple. The reason being that it is my estimation that ritual procession brings into embodiment occult sentience that would otherwise remain otherworldly. In its ability to fulfill certain intercessory promises, the competence or mediumship also establishes a certain claim to a community. Nevertheless, such a claim spells out unresolved tension that is inherent into a ritualized form of communication such as mediumship. This is because the familiar domestic space is unsettled by the invitation of a deity who, although recognized as sacred, is seen as foreign and supernatural to our recognition of the physical world. Now, how does such a religious space that facilitates Chinese mediumship of this type sustain the tension between the concepts of holiness and its counterpoint, often in such enactment of belonging one also depicts the anxiety of the unhomely, or the unhomely, the uncanny, the power to revise existing prescriptions of race, gender, cultural boundaries, would be said to unmake certain assumptions about established customary conventions, so that the tainted and perhaps unconscious assertions can surface, so that we can understand culture and history from a different subject position. As such, the village sort of primary demography are Hokkien from largely the same area from Jinmen, right? It was historically served, the neighborhood, the village was historically served by 3 jetties that have since been silted out since the 1990s. And the villages in the past traded in tin and coal. Today, with the expansion of the town center on the south side of the riverbank, the city village sits within the perimeter now of the expanded sort of township. But really, the village is more than a century old. Outside of Pandamaran, which is another district in Klang, it boasts really the highest concentration of Chinese folk temples in the township. Amongst the 10 or so temples or shrines that dotted this village is this house temple that I'm looking at. But what got me interested in this subject, I was reading John de Bernardi, an anthropologist, sort of like research on Chinese folk religion in Penang, and there was this passage in which he observes, rather interestingly, how Chinese folk religion as a cultural space and network helps to sustain a kind of entrepreneurial sort of like social order. And I wanted to sort of like find out if this is still the case or this is true. So I was sort of like going to this website and came across this sort of like really interesting database or website supported largely by sponsorship from Chinese small medium business sort of enterprises. And I was browsing through it, this sort of like temple sort of like, I sort of came across this temple with a female sort of like Datok sort of like figure. Very often the deity is male, right? So off I went to look for it. So this is what I sort of found. Yeah. So the worship of this Datok Fatimah sort of figure bears a number of unique characteristics. In iconographic sort of form, Datok Fatimah is identifiable as a female figure who wears the hijab and conforms to the ideal of a pious Muslim woman, even as she is invested with a crown that signifies her temporal sovereignty. She is also installed on an altar which looks like a miniature replica of what the house temple looks like externally. Expositions of such form of worships are often reduced to expressions of, say, cultural hybridity, even when the phenomenon is described in terms of sinicization, which a researcher on the subject, Chu Hong Tong, speaks of as a selective form of adaptation. Very often, these acts of worship are understood. Acts of worship are understood through the lens of politics of identity. While not discounting such framework, I've always felt that existing literature on Datok Gong as a phenomenon and typology, while useful, is insufficient in helping to explicate the question of place and belonging. Perhaps not enough attention is paid to the specificity of the site, through which both urban, national, and cultural histories inform the spatial imagination, both real and imagined, of a temple. In my research, I suggest that using Datok Fatimah as a case study, that perhaps the phenomena of ritual possession offers an opportunity to consider how the religiously embodied other complicates the modern narrative of a national discourse, centered on a Malay-dominant and albeit multiracial sort of citizenry. To do so, however, one needs to move beyond the kind of atemporal study of typology in which many studies of Datok Gong has been undertaken, which is to take this as an example to talk about broader issues, say like ethnic relations or something like that. Instead, I want to see if I am able to adapt to the historical specificity of a shrine or temple and locate such spatial imagination in time to see what it is actually trying to say. Right. So, interestingly enough, ritual possession did not take place in this temple until 1981. Prior to that, the house temple of Datok Fatimah operated more or less as a shrine until the current medium was called to serve the Dato as a vehicle. The temple is listed as having been in existence even before 1930, but villagers spoke of it having an older history. Up until the early 1990s, it existed as a wooden shack, similar to many of the wooden houses that made up the village. The original shack sort of burned down in 1992, which spurred the worshippers to construct a brick house temple for Datok Fatimah. So the brick sort of structure today bears a number of interesting sort of iconographic features, which is very much a composite of different architectural forms, like a postmodern sort of like pastiche. But what it does is that it mirrors the architectural structure that frames the altar, which you saw previously, so that one enters the temple to find another microcosm or macrocosm, depending on one's view of the religious cosmology in which the deity resides within. In the outer structure, one is able to identify the swallowtail ridges in the roof, which is commonly found in Indian architecture. Then there is also the three-tiered roof that is reminiscent of the traditional mosque construction in the Nusantara region, or in the sort of Southeast Asia region. In addition, there are the metal board cutouts that is in reference to the Indo-Saracenic sort of form of architecture, which came to be adopted by the British colonial sort of government to represent the Islamic roots of the federated Malay state. These are attached to the eaves of the second roof tier, but were once part of the Taiwan gateway that would lead visitors to the temple located a distance away from the main road. Since early 2000, redevelopment of the area and expansion of the Klang township proper resulted in the removal of the gateway. The expansion also resulted in the displacement of a whole class of migrant Indonesian workers, especially Javanese, who were renting many of the Chinese kampung houses nearby since the 80s. The reason for this was because many of the houses were by then already vacated as a result of the younger generation of villagers moving out to pursue other business opportunities or white-collar jobs after having attained some form of upward social mobility. Datok Fatimah's sort of like emergence in the form of the medium in the early 1980s was prescient of the arrival of a new constituency. In fact, many of the Javanese migrant workers could see in her as their own ancestor or saint. Because of their proximity, they would also come to her for spiritual sort of consultation in times of need. After all, who better understood their predicament than another migrant herself? So as I was speaking to the sort of temple custodian, the story that has sort of like passed down is that Datuk Fatimah is of Japanese origin. She was not Malay as I originally thought, and had escaped a war to settle in Klang. She came with her father and two other sisters. It is unclear to me why their father were not venerated, while another figure by the name of Tengku Hassan and his 5 color-coded sort of generals are given a space on the altar. Nor is it clear which war in Java was the temple sort of like custodian referring to when I was sort of like asking him about the history of the temple. These things that we see back into time is inconsequential anyway for them. They belong to mythology, reduced to imagery and essences, and serve primarily as a vehicle to allow for certain concentration of power and social relations to emerge. In any case, the oldest surviving artifact in the temple is a wooden plaque that survived the fire. Prior to early 1980s, the main focus of worship was a wooden plaque that had her name written in Jawi. The plaque is today hidden from view behind the statues and could never really be seen except during a feast day, when the statues were brought out and placed on an extended sort of dais. Right? So the plaque, however, was not the principal object of worship in the early years of the temple. Perhaps this is in reference to the anachronism of Islam and the privileging of the word or text, so central to the local centrism of Orthodox Abrahamic faith. Eventually, the statues of Datuk Fatimah replaced the wooden plaque, which is now sort of like placed behind the altar around the 1980s. And this explains why when we see her image today, she is seen wearing a sort of hijab, perhaps an indication of the Islamization of Malay culture throughout the same period, that is the 1980s, that this did not go unnoticed by the Hokkien community here. Nevertheless, the custodians and villagers would describe this process as a gradual sort of promotion within the Chinese heavenly bureaucracy. Even though, so before she was just a sort of like, she was just worshipped with a blood, then later on they worshipped her with a statue, right? And this only happened in the 1980s, and they describe this process as a gradual sort of promotion within the Chinese heavenly bureaucracy. This meant that even though she only spoke Javanese in the beginning, she would eventually learn how to speak Mandarin, and later on attained the facility to converse directly with villagers in the vernacular sort of Hokkien. A promotion was also signified by the color associated with it, from white to yellow. So, as with Chinese mediumship across the board, there is an element of charisma and competence that the medium exudes. As is often the case, the performance remains transferable. In effect, the spectacle of ritual possession here is very closely tied to the current temple medium, who is called upon to jump, or qiao, as the term that is used to describe the act of becoming a vehicle of possession about 36 years ago at the age of 18, around 1981. If jumping figures so significantly in the medium's sort of coming-of-age narrative, perhaps the moment in which Datok Fatimah began to speak through him also signaled larger social and political changes. The year saw Mahathir Mohamad appointed as the 4th Prime Minister of Malaysia, who would almost immediately launch his new peace policy. Beneath this corporatist reform that would pave way for the privatization of numerous governmental agencies throughout the 1980s was a paradigmatic groundswell that saw the growing institutionalization of Islam throughout the 80s. If Datuk Fatimah spoke, my sense is she spoke in plaintive terms. Her emergence in mediumistic forms since the 1980s is equally telling of contemporary tensions. In this sense, the domestic structure of the house temple in its mirroring effect of a temple within a temple or a mosque within a mosque produces a mimicry like sort of like produced a kind of like mimicry of the national sort of like discourse. Here Datuk Fatimah's climbing up the Chinese imperial bureaucratic rank will be understood as an inversion to the very concept of Masuk Melayu, which is translated, and this defines Malay identity as something autopraxic rather than genetic, and that one could profess Malayness through the adoption of Malay customary habits and beliefs. And this was installed as the working definition of the national cultural policy since 1971. Datuk Fatimah's sort of transformation from a Javanese-speaking sort of like deity to one that spoke court Mandarin and finally gained the ability to speak vernacular Hokkien demonstrates that the performative sort of sleight of hand is at play here with the Tai Chiang villagers. Their view is that the assimilatory sort of like discourse of Masuk Melayu could also work the other way around in a pluralist sort of like society. Through this act of mimicry, certain foundational sort of like assumptions about the Malaysian discourse of race becomes almost caricatured and comic, thereby exposing its seemingly stable and perennial sort of registers as essentially constructed and unstable. More significantly, I think, is a forgotten place as a guardian saint of migrant Indonesian workers that trickled in throughout the 1980s, but grew in presence in the 1990s, who were brought into Malaysia in droves as a result of Mahathir's sort of civilizational ethos, infrastructural modernization at any cost, including the importation of foreign labor. In turn, they sought out a figure that could represent their own history as migrant. If these workers were not historians in the academic sense of the term, who would dig into the national archives and discover earlier history of Javanese settlements along the west coast of Peninsular Malaysia, they would at least found certain sort of consolation in the kind of imagined genealogy that Datuk Fatimah, being a baby within the neighborhood that they live in, ultimately provided for them. But with installation of science and technological progress as a paradigm for modernity in 1980s Malaysia, especially through active policy making in the 5th Malaysia Plan of 1986, suggests that such paradigm also allowed for a different kind of cultural landscape to emerge. In 1981, for example, a summary of unidentified flying objects and related events in Malaysia 1950 to 1980 by Kuantan-based UFO researcher Ahmad Jamaluddin is published by the Center of UFO Studies, USA. By 1989, Rahmat Harun published one of the first few adult sci-fi novels in the Malay language for an adult reading public. At the dawn of the 1990s, early sci-fi films such as X-Ray paralleled the establishment of a hippie community Magic River in Kuala Lumpur. The first UFO convention was held in 1995, the same year that Mastika, a well-known but by then flagging magazine on current affairs, underwent a change in editorial direction to become a best-selling ghost and mystery sort of like tabloid. If the cultural landscape could serve as a barometer for the paradox of modernization, then when Datok Fatimah sort of like became sentient, so to speak, she became sort of like, when she spoke through a medium finally, she spoke not as a sort of subaltern, for subalterns cannot after all really speak. Instead, what the house temple allows us to gauge was a world sustained by contradictions and anxieties of the irrational as a channel to recover certain forms of desire and aspirations, subjectivities, and agencies. So we return finally, as a conclusion, to consider the build structure here, to examine the temple's sort of spatial discourse once again. As discussed above, the mock Indo-Saracenic feature is now wedded with the Nusantara sort of geared roof, but such assimilatory register was at the end of the day localized into a working class sort of Hokkien worldview. After all, as suggested by the medium, he was told by the caretaker that during one of the moments of transpossession, Datuk Fatimah mentioned that her ancestry could ultimately be traced back to China, even though she's from Nusantara, right? And you know, so in recent times, so this image of the pendatang, which can be very loosely sort of like translated as a migrant or the arrivee, whether old or new, has acquired sort of acrimonious sort of heat within popular discourse in Malaysia. But in a parallel worldview, it could be said migration formed the bedrock of a community's historical and spatial imagination. In this instance, such an imagination could be harnessed into a coextensive form of sympathy. The pendatang here crystallizes the unhomeliness of urban history as a pattern of settlement that is always unsettling, not because permanence is never a characteristic of the pendatang sort of like built environment. It was also unsettling on the ground that because the built structure itself essentially expresses what a kind of what art historian Christopher Wood and Alexander Nagel consider as a double historicity. The term here is used by Wood and Nagel to describe a kind of mental framework to understand Renaissance art. But double historicity here could also be applied to religious sort of like built structure in the modern period. In that while these built structures are understood to be created or made recently, the object or the structure is at the same time also accorded with a kind of value as if it is a very old thing. What is important to the villagers here is not that the fire gutted the temple in 1992, but that they have to sort of like rebuild this temple with sort of new materials, but that the temple, though newly constructed, has been there for more than 100 years old. Time past and time present collapses and fold into each other in this instance. Here the temple dedicated to Datuk Fatimah establishes royal feminine prestige as a cipher for migratory sort of like domesticity and serves as a counterpoint to the intertwined sort of forces of court and colonial history. Court and colonial as well as post-colonial history of Klang. At the same time, Datuk Fatimah was also always speaking in the present tense, registering the anxieties of a period when forces of capitalism and cultural hegemony began to erase this past. The Japanese workers are today, after all, long gone and displaced by the expansion of retail shop lots in the northern district since the year 2000. So all the sort of Japanese migrants that used to populate the area has sort of like moved to other parts of Malaysia. But through this example, I want to suggest that we can sort of like look at the house temple and look at its history specifically to sort of examine how it has accommodated the mediumship of the Javanese sort of female deity that relays a unique form of transhistorical allegiance. This is not just a story of inter-ethnic relations. It is also a story. It also tells a story that shows us a different side to the mercantile sort of ambition so central to the history of the Chinese in the Nanyang. This phenomenon produces a relayed cultural bond between two working class migrant communities, Javanese and Chinese, across the 20th century, even as such allegiance is already checked by an ever-present anxiety of identity politics that threatens to dwarf its future. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Okay. Nice. So you have like very close groups, so it's more like chit chat. It's really amazing to see. I think that both of you has give us a quite different perspectives, and one see how the transformation of a god kind of reflect the complicated social structures in Malaysia. And while Professor Gong's trying to using all this unresistible religion's power for the vernacular culture, how it kind of formed their own self-organized society and a system which you counter as the state or war machine. I think I was just to throw out one question is how, because in the exhibition, Professor Gong was trying to create this relationship between contemporary art and with the vernacular art. And my question is why there's such an involvement? What's the initial idea? Because from my understanding is that all this traditional culture, since the Japanese colonization, there was an involvement of the intellectuals or artists. But there's this, to a certain point, the intellectual kind of exists from the development of vernacular culture and it goes its own way. And then why now you think there is a necessary to engage that? And how do you think through this exhibition with the comparison, we're trying to create that dialogue. What does that lead to? And for Simon, it was more like, from your presentation, this kind of invisibility of the either artist or intellectual or academics involvement with the transformation of the goddess. Why is that is in your presentation is kind of very little presence of it. So the main question is what back to the contemporary art or artists, what we're doing, how we're going to take all these different perspectives to reflect the current situation that we're dealing with.
Thank you for the question. Because in Taiwan, I was thinking of what factors separates the academy, modern, contemporary arts with the folk societies, the temple art or the folk arts. People always think that it was two kind of style. One we can classify them as the folk art, temple art, and the other one was modern art, contemporary art. But I think it's my observation that maybe the decisive factor was the point of view with how they look at the society or the social. Because when people think, when the society for them was so stable, and so separate and so structured. So it seems that impossible that the young art student or artist, they go into the temple. And it's also important that the temple painter or the architecture, they get into the department of the architecture in art school. But we can easily find that this is not the truth, because many artists, they come from that kind of community. That's their hometown, or that's their community. They are born in that town and they grow up with that kind of family. But why they bury these histories so deep in their memory? They just don't talk about that. I think that's maybe that's not the problem of the reflection. That's the problem of the network of the collective. We just didn't have not any kind of that kind of network that people can reach with each other, and they can put the so-called the traditional art and the modern art together. Because all kind of competition and institution are trying to separate in the name of the modernity or modernization. They trying to separate that kind of connection with the temple and the school, the temple and art school, and the temple and with young people who are doing the work of the art. So I think maybe it's the platform. Our exhibition can become the kind of a platform that to initiate this kind of a network and trying to encourage the young artists and the traditional artists. They can think and they can make some action, and they can sit together and dialogue with each other and participate in this exhibition. Today I mentioned the sociologists that at the same time they are anthropologists, the PA class and Bruno Latour and the philosopher Deleuze. In their thinking, it is not the problem, or we can sit here and reflect the whole structure, the social structure was like such and such. I think it's a problem of the action. When we become the actor, there comes some potential condition can realize themselves in the process. And suddenly, the conception so rigid as modernity or the modern arts become blurry, and people can imagine maybe different kind of process of creation with the elements of the traditional temple arts, or the temple art, the master or some younger generation in temple arts, they can adopt the different thinking of creation and the concept of the world. This is just one thing about.
Sorry, what's your question?
So, because in your presentation, there is an absence of, because why we're doing this talk today is trying to create this dialogue, find the discussion or argument of how this can adapt to the art or content of what is meant. We can learn from that, but from your presentation, there is an absence of either coming out artists or like intellectuals. There is missing in the transformation of the
Right. Yeah, sure than the contemporary artists who are interested in this issue, but I primarily sort of like came in because I was sort of fascinated by this topic, primarily because it's not that it's not sort of like studied. Very often when it's sort of like studied and how it's sort of like translated into, say, an intellectual sort of like discourse, it's sort of talked about primarily as a sort of like race relations sort of like issue, right? This idea of sort of cultural hybridity, or it's sort of like unique to sort of like Malaysia, it sort of represents sort of like Malaysian sort of like multiracial sort of like discourse. But over and beyond that, I was also sort of, and primarily it's also sort of like viewed in relation to heritage studies, like that's like huge thing there. But over and beyond that, I was also sort of like wondering if you could sort of like introduce a political dimension to that sort of like reading, more than a sort of like inter-ethnic sort of like kind of interaction. Could it also sort of like tell us something about sort of like working class sort of like aspiration and interaction and sort of like social sort of like dynamics? So that's where sort of like coming from. And primarily it's also an attempt, as I'm sort of like working along, is to sort of like try to understand the social life of sort of like religion, right? And religious sort of like cultural expression, so that all these doesn't just become an essentialized sort of like image, right? How do you then locate that within history? How does history then, history in relation to urban changes, then sort of like impact the way people organize themselves? So that's my angle. So yeah, I don't think I have primarily sort of like approach it in the sense that there's a contemporary artist sort of like working on it. So it's just a sort of like research that I've been looking on. If there's any connection to contemporary art, then it's definitely good. But I will not stress it doing the contemporary. It has sort of like opened up the possibility of even inquiring into this field, such as for religion.
I think what maybe my question wasn't very clear is it's not the involvement of contemporary art, it's like how, in general, how this transformation, like what's the agencies behind that. I think before the talk, Professor Gong was mentioning that there is one festival that may take place in Taiwan 1996, around that time. It was the first art festival, traditional art festival, but maybe you would like to elaborate that?
Before that, I can add something that yesterday the Taiwan highest court claims that the new explanation for the constitutional laws that for the LGBT, yeah. I think the LGBT is a good example of collective. They are not thinking of to become a state. And but after 20, 30 years striving for the recognition, they were accepted by the constitution in Taiwan. But at the same time, we confronted a new problem that because Taiwan is not a normal state or country in the international scale. So how about the constitution of Taiwan means? Yeah. So I think when I think about this kind of collective, how they work and function and to connect a new network and invite different participants and the actor. I think I'm thinking about this kind of politics. It's not the politics of the modern state. And I think and this is quite interesting when we're talking about this in in this one because it is a scenario for an evocation. The evocation kind of the I think the anxiety for the Hong Kong status quo, and you can see the different group doing some kind of a project in theater, in the presentation. I think in what way we can realize the different collective and become stronger and keep their energy, and they can transformation by themselves and keep their resources. And it is not in a modern way of efficiency. Yeah, this is the basic problem. Why I'm thinking about this problem. And in Taiwan history, for the contemporary art, it's not the first example, and it's not just only me or the first one was thinking about this problem. During 1992 to 1996, there are religion festival who were based on the folk festival in Taipei County. And the first curator, she was quite famous in Taiwan, but now still, Chen Wen-qian. In the beginning, in 1992, she curated for the whole project and invited her friend from the United States because that time he was just went back from his study in the United States, and he cooperated with the DPP, Democratic Progressive Party in Taipei County, and he also invited many contemporary artists and little theater to organize a festival with the folk art, with the folk festival, the Ghost Festival. Every I think it's September or August, and in this way they work in the form of a workshop into the community and the different school, in the high school and the elementary school, and after that they become integrated festival that's very hybrid with artists, community people, the old people, the city government, and the little theater. And after all, they also participate the whole the whole process of the ecological task to clean the river, the Danshui River, the year by year. They have the 5 years. So this is an old example in the middle of 1990 in Taiwan. And it's a very brilliant example because it's the first example that before that the Kuomintang government they haven't ever organized this kind of festival. But the DPP when they become a new way of the governance, a new way of governmentality, they invent this kind of festival. But the first version was a religion festival and based on the folk religion. And I think, and after that, the different local government, they adopt the same way as their way of a cultural governance. And I think when I organized this exhibition, I also trying to think about have we any new methodology to do this kind of festival, and what kind of philosophy we have when we do this work and have this project, but not only as supporter of the new liberalism or the new governance method of the government. So I think the example of the 1990 in Taiwan's context is quite important.
Does anybody have a question for the?
Actually, what you just explained is quite nice, because throughout the whole presentation, I have this worry about how for example, the interpretation from the artists then would somehow transform some of the traditional practice. Yeah, because different parties through these networks, they are interconnected and like influence each other. Whereas in Simon's case, somehow this story kind of evolved by itself without too much outsiders influence. It seems quite nice in its own way. And yeah, but then so I do have maybe 2 points, 1 question on that. So how is this chapter going to be sustained? Because you mentioned the communities all gone. Has it always been sustained on its own because the people around just maybe somehow contribute, or because the government way that uses how try to serve and then because of this worry, because I somehow kind of connecting this whole issue with, for example, in Hong Kong we have the Gong Jow Jiun. We do have some kind of ritual festivals in Hong Kong, but some of them have been sort of too much touristic. So maybe this is the influence from the liberals and capitalism stuff that you mentioned. So how do you see this kind of network?
Sort of like with Islam as the official religion means that of course non-Islamic sort of like faiths and religious organizations are involved and all sort of supported by the state. So all contributions sort of come from the community. With a temple like this, most of its regular sort of like patrons, they are mostly in their sort of like 60s to 80s. So they're quite old already. Even the median is about 70 years old or something like that. And so if there were sort of like younger sort of like worshippers, they are primarily sort of like connected to the village itself, but they don't live in the village anymore. So they're sort of like moved out and have lived in sort of like other suburbs around the sort of like Klang region, and they only sort of like come back and do like the annual sort of like feasting for this sort of like thing. So it's quiet most days. Not many people sort of like go to the temples anymore. But actually nearby, so as I was saying, nearby there are like about 10 or so sort of like temples, and even more sort of like shrines that sort of like runs along the coast, along the bank of this area. So I don't exactly know how it sort of sustains itself because they're still building new sort of like structure. My guess, I have to sort of do more research, is that there is a crematorium here that's part of the business sort of like that. network of this village. So that might be the money generating sort of like organization of company. And I think it's quite interesting to sort of like bring this up when you sort of raise this question about sort of like neoliberalism, right? Because I guess with all these sort of like sort of semi-autonomous sort of like spaces and networks and stuff like that, it is at the end of the day sustained by some form of capital. Very often it's small to medium-sized sort of enterprises, and it's a kind of interesting sort of like reminder that not all forms of capital are neoliberal in sort of like nature, and that this and that capital, certain sort of forms of capital enable new sort of like networks, patterns of sort of like circulation to emerge that can be sort of like autonomous to say a state.
Thank you for the question. It is quite hard to invite both sides and at the same time criticize both sides. You know, because in Taiwan we have the cultural heritage bureau, and they are very big circle, but they never communicate with the modern art or the contemporary art circle. So they are all separate. And for the folk festival, they become the tourism, with a kind of a new liberalism. Yeah. It's the same situation in Taiwan. So the folk festival, the cultural heritage institution, and the modern contemporary art institution, they separate as the kind of fraction of the modernity, the separation. And in our academy, we also have a different department. And the students, they don't talk with each other. People who support the tourism and the management, people who do the work of the conservation in the cultural heritage, people who become the modern artists and the contemporary artists. They don't talk and live with each other. But maybe they live quite near with each other. Because we have motorcycle in Thailand city. It's quite easy. And they can live easily with each other. But they just don't talk about their content. They devoted themselves in a different region. So what happened of this situation? Maybe for me it's a kind of you just have to create some platform they can sit together and work together. Yeah. But it's quite delicate because you have to invite some kind of people full of energy. Yeah. It's we can say they are artists or some curators, or maybe they are architects. They are trying to combine people in their place. They try to construct something, and they try to show in different way of their photography. And maybe there are some people who full of energy who just paint for the temple. But you can invite these kind of people together, and they would like to talk with each other. But some people, they would not like, or they just don't have this kind of habit to talk with different circles people. Yeah. But so it is a potential space, potential place, that potential platform you can invite some people who have this kind of desire to dialogue. Then if you get this kind of opportunity, it will happen. So it's a kind of chance. and through this exhibition, I think the basic principle for me is I have to enact some right atmosphere and some right place to invite people, the right people to come together and have a nice talk with each other. Not just think about what artwork have to put in somewhere, not about this. It's about some idea. So I think this process, we use a methodology of editing and interview their story. And we invite important artists or architect, photographer to join our process of interviewing. They can know very detailed and touched by the story when we are doing the work of an interview. And after that, we do the work of editing and publication. And it realizes this hidden story that's hidden in the contemporary or young artists of their temple background, because they have that kind of family, that kind of community, that kind of experience to participate, that kind of craft. And we discovered the older generation who do the temple painting, who have a very modern idea about art, because he was influenced by an old modern artist in Taiwan who was educated in Japan, in Tokyo. So this kind of story become enriched with them, each other. I think when some spark make the flame begins, it will extend along the people who begin to have a different group to converse and communicate with each other. This is my experience.
Okay, I think it's getting late tonight, and if there are more questions, we can continue the talk at dinner. So thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Professor, and thanks Simon. Thank you.